I'll admit it. I love the SAAB Viggen. There is just something about it that just really gets me. And I have covered it before, specifically the JA37 fighter variant. But recently I was trawling around doing research and I came across details of what would probably have been the ultimate variant of this iconic aircraft, the SAAB 37 AU. So this will probably be a short one because the aircraft was only ever a proposal. And yes, those are AIM-54 Phoenix missiles hanging off the mock-up. I think you see why I like it already. In the late 1960s, the Royal Australian Air Force, the RAAF, began to consider what they were going to replace their Dassault Mirage 3s with. Though these had only entered service with the RAAF in 1965, it was obvious that the technology was moving fast, and the Australians reckoned that the Mirages would have to be replaced by 1980. They began to look around at what was available, and there seemed to be two principal options at the time. The first was the Dassault Mirage F1, which was just starting prototype testing. The second was an unusual new design that was causing comments throughout the world, the SAAB Viggen. In January 1970, the Australian government reached out to SAAB, amongst others, with a request for information on the new JA37 that was then under development for use with the Swedish Air Force. SAAB had to get permission from the Swedish government first on a possible export, but this was given, and that December, certain classified documents on the Viggen were given to the Australians for their consideration. The then in-service variants of the Viggen, primarily designed for attack missions, did not suit the RAAF's needs for a multi-role fighter, and so they decided to draw up their own requirements that any Aussie Viggen would need to meet to be acceptable. These were sent to SAAB towards the end of 1971, and by the following March, the company responded with their proposed aircraft for the RAAF, designated as the SAAB 37 AU. This would have had considerable changes compared to the JA37 that was then also taking shape. The RAAF needed better speed than the attack Viggens were capable of for the interceptor role, and for this SAAB cooperated with Grumman to develop new intakes for the aircraft that would allow for improved performance. The Australians also made it plain that they wanted a fixed gun armament on their aircraft, the then in production AJ37s using Aiden gun pods, and I suspect this played a part in the decision by the Swedes to fit the powerful Oerlikon 30mm to their JA37s, which was, as said, also being developed. The new aircraft also required longer legs, and the mock-up that was built of the 37 AU showed it with a retractable aerial refuelling probe. But what the RAAF really wanted was long-range interception capability with beyond visual range missiles. Again, this would be built into the JA37, which would be equipped with an Ericsson PS46/A pulse Doppler multimode radar and the ability to use Skyflash missiles, an improved variant on the American AIM-7 Sparrow. However, the mock-up for the 37 AU showed it carrying, as noted, AIM-54 Phoenix. Now, these were really cutting edge at the time, developed for very long-range engagements against Soviet supersonic bombers attacking US Navy aircraft carriers. As such, they would seem a good choice for the RAAF, looking to patrol the seas around their extensive coastline. And though I haven't found definite evidence of it, I am assuming that again cooperation with Grumman occurred. Their F-14 would ultimately be the only aircraft to carry the missile operationally. And notably, the JA37 would use some of the same digital components in its flight systems as the F-14. In fact, fitting Phoenix to Viggens would have required a very extensive and expensive radar upgrade to make their carriage worthwhile, but it was probably a more practical idea than a later British proposal to convert Vulcan heavy bombers into long-range interceptors with AIM-54s. But I digress. Of course, the 37 AU's information is all based on a few documents and a mock-up, so assumably the final form and capabilities of the aircraft were still open to change. Because the Aussies were apparently very interested in the possibility of getting the Viggen, and in May 1973, SAAB issued formal offers on the RAAF purchasing 27, 67 or 127 aircraft, with the first of these being projected to be available for service by 1976, if the options were exercised. These deals, depending on how many aircraft the Australians went for, would also include production of components and perhaps most of the aircraft in Australia itself, which was also a critical consideration. The government aircraft factory in Melbourne had been producing aircraft since the Second World War, but with the end of Mirage 3 production at the facility for the RAAF, the plant needed a new aircraft to keep its lines open. With this all in mind, the RAAF dispatched a team to look at a number of aircraft for possible selection. The Viggen, the Mirage F1, the McDonnell Douglas F-15, and the Northrop YF-17 Cobra. But this team were also aware that there were a number of other interesting new aircraft taking shape at the time, and their recommendation was that the RAAF adopt a policy of wait and see to see what else would be available in a few years. In 1974, the Australians decided on this course, and the replacement of their Mirages was rescheduled to be some point in the 1980s, with the replacement program starting anew in 1976. By now, there were several fresh possibilities that offered better capabilities, and the Australians told SAAB that the costs of building a dedicated aircraft for their needs were now too high, and instead could they have the prices for acquisition of the standard AU37 that was in the process of adoption by the Swedish Air Force. That killed the 37AU, but there were still hopes that the Viggen might end up down under after all. But as said, the competition was now much fiercer, with Dassault now offering their latest aircraft, the Mirage 2000, a very capable fighter indeed. Worse for SAAB though were the new American options. In Europe, the General Dynamics F-16 had won what was termed the sale of the century, and had been selected not just to be a standard fighter with the United States, but also with the air forces of Norway, Belgium, Denmark and the Netherlands. A sale that would start the F-16 down its road as one of the preeminent combat aircraft on the planet for the next 50 years, and counting. Meanwhile, the YF-17 had morphed into the FA-18 Hornet, again an extremely competent multi-role aircraft which would ultimately go on to become Australia's choice. This meant that the Viggen, though only a few years older and still in its development cycle, was outclassed in many respects by the new American options which, with massive sales already in the bag and production ramping up, also made better sense for long-term investment. And that concludes the story of the SAAB 37AU Viggen, an aircraft that is an intriguing what-if, and one that, if only for selfish reasons, I would have loved to have seen be adopted.